Never thought I'd say this, JP, but there's only one place to start, and it is the home of Don West. And no, it is not Impact Wrestling, JP, as the logo's behind you for video viewers on YouTube and now on the Spotify can see. We're gonna chat TNA, mate. Did you ever think we'd do a podcast covering? Did we exist during the TNA years? When did TNA stop? Like, I feel like it stopped before we even started podcasting. Maybe it was a couple of years in. I think it was like the dying days of TNA. Maybe we covered a little bit, but TNA Wrestling, mate, crossed the line. It's back. You should be flying the flag. I thought you'd have a big TNA t-shirt on, your Don West Soul hat. Like, the dream is back, is it not, JP? It's funny. I crack a joke. Like, my immediate reaction to that news story was like, that's fucking hilarious. They're going back to TNA. Are they joking? And we can get into that and why all the reasons why there's probably bad reason to do it. But it has surprised me the amount of people who've come off the woodwork who are like massively. There has been a push, I would say, over like the last 18 months, couple of years or so, of like TNA nostalgia. So Garrett Kidney say that on Twitter, who is kind of the leader of that pack. You're past that gang as well, mate.
Oh yeah. I mean, for a lot of us, the reason for supporting it, without going into sort of like
2017,
2017 for this March.
Never actually officially covered TNA.
March 2017 in there as well, and then between June 2017 to September 2017, it was Global Force Wrestling as well. Soon, hopefully, to be another show that we cover on the Patreon. But it was there as we wanted an alternative to WWE at that point in time after them buying up ECW and WWE. So it's, the name itself was very, very kind of Russo. I'm really split on this in so many ways. Like, I kind of can't almost decide how I feel about it. Instinctively, if you ask me, I think it's the thing that they're known best for, and it fits in with all of their kind of branding of other stuff. All the really major stuff that happened in their history with all of the various kind of important people who passed through, like your AJs and the rest of it. It's all TNA history rather than Impact. Impact has been surviving since they've been Impact Wrestling. They've managed to get through effectively because of Anthem Entertainment, and they've kind of steadily grown, like at a very slow rate, as in it doesn't appear to be like hemorrhaging. They're kind of quite well managed, quite well booked. I think there's possibly a good argument for Scott D'Amore to being the kind of Booker of the Year. That's more damning with faint praise in some ways, because I don't think it's been a banner year for creative elsewhere on this. But in terms of the rebrand itself, because I heard about it on like kind of social media, so I was just like weirded out by it. I was like, okay, they're going back to it. The connotations, which always was the problem with the original of TNA, because it was Vince Russo, the idea of, you're thinking tits and ass, not total non-stop action. But that feels like it's on a different time. I don't think that connotation works necessarily today in 2023. If you're going to say TNA Wrestling, I think it's kind of like an easier sell. If in this country, for example, in the UK, it'd be easy to come over and go, oh, is that thing that was on Challenge TV? And you'd know what it was. You wouldn't think of it as Impact Wrestling. You'd always think of Impact as the TNA show, and then they had their pay-per-views. Now, I get why they made the change. In some ways, is this going to be part of like a bigger push? That's the thing I can't quite work out. Is this going to involve Anthem putting in more money, more time, more effort, all of these kind of things behind it to do something with it? But it is like, is this a desperation move to just go, right, we're just going to go back to it and we're going to see what sticks? Yeah. And they're going to do 6-sided rings next as a result of this. Is there, because I think what they're trying to do ultimately is trying to shop this as a TV program, or what they probably really would like somebody to buy it as much as anything else, but to shop it as a TV program in an era where wrestling TV is cheap alternative to live sports. If the NWA going onto the CW network is true, you might see a few companies do that. And TNA has weirdly more name recognition than Impact Wrestling. Yeah. And plus, it's less confusing if you're showing all that classic footage, all the stuff from the early 2000s. Well, it's all got TNA all over it up until you kind of get to
a lot of the YouTube's got Global Force Wrestling on it, but that's another problem. No, I'm with you in being split on it, because like I say, my initial reaction was to laugh at it because it is funny. And it's a very TNA move, like to be like, oh, we'll have a 6-sided ring. We won't have a 6-sided ring. Guess what? The 6-sided ring is back. Guess what? It was never good. Like there's been loads like these moments, and it's like, after finally, and it was hard at first to stop calling it TNA. Every now and then I'll slip, but mostly the Impact Wrestling branding is kind of stuck. So to like spend all this time establishing that to then go back is a very LOL TNA move, and it's funny, and my like gut reaction is to go, oh, you fucking dickheads, you're going back to a name that was like back in the day associated with tits and ass, and it was a pun, and it was never a good name, but Spotlight was never a good name, and that stuck with us for fucking 7 years. So we've got to clear into it. That it's understand. It happens. Does it once something becomes? You just say it a lot. Undertaker. We always talk about that being the way one of a bad wrestling name. Triple H. What's a Triple H? You don't even think about it. You just say it. What's a Big Show? Like eventually, it just becomes the name, doesn't it? And I think when they've originally became Impact Wrestling again, I think I'd have to check the tape if we did even talk about it at the time. I would imagine my take would be, yeah, it makes sense. And I think we've overall over the last few years saw them as like, you know what, lads, they know their place in the world. They're not trying to be the TNA of old. Impact Wrestling's a different thing, and they know that they're of a certain, they're in that MLW, adjacent, used to be ROH kind of slot, in the grand scheme of wrestling.
Yeah.
And I think we encourage that and say that's realistic and what you should be. But when you look at it now, it's like, is that actually a bit of an own goal in a little way? That you're almost like, you're pocketing yourself as a smaller company, as, you're, for better or worse, that TNA name was a thing that people knew. Like it was, especially over here, Europe in general, but the UK, there were lots of big TNA fans. It was on a decent slot on TV. It was a challenger to WWE at a time. It was a big time wrestling organization. It was doing, $1 million to $1.5 million of points on TV. You know what I mean? It had brand equity. It genuinely did. And maybe it is a little bit of an own goal to kind of just own that name and not use it, and instead be this, I think of TNA for all its shit, and there is a lot of it, and there's a lot of good stuff too, that should be said too, and the TNA loyalists will tell us that, but there's a lot of bad. But like for all of that stuff I think in my head, the vision of TNA is the company that failed, but tried to kind of take on WWE and be the original challenger brand that Tony Khan tries to think of himself as. You say the words Impact Wrestling, I think tiny company that's of MLW size that has small shows with nobody there, and it is what it is. And maybe a name doesn't hugely change that, but it probably is at this point, more associated with a bigger time wrestling company, as well as being associated with all the negatives. And like I say, with that nostalgia push, I'm more sympathetic to it than I think I was like my initial reaction to it, JP. I think I've maybe turned around a little bit on it, like, fuck it, what else are you going to do? Like, I was talking about it, first subject on the spotlight. Like, when's that happen? It's front page of all the wrestling news websites because of some other stuff we're going to talk about today as well. But they're actually in front of the news cycle. So even if it's just a temporary kind of like publicity push, and if they are trying to sink more money into it and up production and stuff like that, they've got a little bit of attention. There's maybe a ceiling to that TNA nostalgia, but they've got a bit of attention, so it's kind of worked in that way in some ways too.
That's it, isn't it? And I really agree with you there. That they have managed for once to capture the attention. And I think the reason why I'm willing to give this a shot is partly because of the people that they've currently got involved, namely of which Scott D'Amore, who really is. I know it's. I mean, like in some ways, he is like Mr. TNA. This is the guy who the company has been at its most steady when he's been in charge. That's when it's been at its best. From a booking direction, it's generally like kind of at its worst, it's a competently booked product with limitations because of what they have budget wise for wrestlers and things like that. And you go, okay, they make the best of what they have here. And if he is kind of all right with it, in many ways, he'd be the person you'd have to trust his judgment. You'd have to say, okay, if he thinks this is actually like a good decision, and he's the one who's out there like fronting the company and says, do you know what? It's TNA that people talk about as well. And if we are going to try and vlog this, and we are going to try and like maybe sell this onto a TV network to have this, they've still got Impact there as part of the branding, because that will always be the name of the TV show as well. So it's not like it's a weird twist from one to the other. I also think there's this odd thing about wrestling and wrestling fans. We are conditioned to think of like acronyms for companies, particularly three-letter ones. So WWE, AEW, like even the idea of TNA kind of falling into that kind of camp, whether it's, the chants or anything else. It's the stuff that kind of sticks with us as wrestling fans, like WCW and NWA, and the list goes on and on. We kind of always think that this is going to be the case, but I can't help but feel the push for this, the fact they're going to be at a 2,000-seat stadium, some of the other stories that are coming out today, which...
Well,
it's,
God, you said it.
Yeah. I mean, to say it's ambitious, is it going to happen? No. It used to remind me of what would be Spurs transfer gossip of like, we're interested in this player. It's like, yeah, you might be interested. Watford United might be interested in signing Lionel Messi from Inter Miami. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. They're two entirely different things. But I do suspect that they think, okay, there is a chance where there is this possibility of getting decent paid TV deals for the product, for something that's been around for a while. What it relies on them doing is not changing anything that they're doing, but just improving the people that they kind of have there to be able to do it. In many ways, that's like the way they kind of should fit within this kind of world and universe. I kind of like them for making the attempt to try and do something. Like, I don't know, I might get sick of it very quickly. Does it mean I'm going to watch TNA all the time when it rebrands in 2024? I think, like we said earlier on, it's a really tricky one because I kind of don't hate the name in many ways, but I also simultaneously am incredibly nostalgic for it. And this creates the whole problem that we kind of have. It's synonymous with good and bad, but it is known. That's the thing. And Impact Wrestling, you're thinking of them in these tapings at the beginning with like Bobby Lashley doing some of his best work. This is the reason for his WWE run, in front of about 50 people in just like what appeared to be a darkened room, and there'd be a ring there, and then we just somehow managing to scratch and survive.
Yeah, that's where I am. There's clear and obvious negatives like that are tied to that brand. I just don't think you can avoid that. But time heals wounds, and I think, it's been a while now. Like I say, that nostalgia element has kind of pulled in to the point where, I think the fact that it is just at the end of the day, people know what TNA is, more so than they know what Impact Wrestling is, and I think that's it, black and white, like that, and that makes it probably worth doing. And again, it grabs these headlines. The idea of like, as you alluded to there, and I've got on the screen for video viewers, there's been a couple of stories dropping today. Basically, apparently at that the TV taping. Now still won't get. It's going to take getting used to again. We got so used to Impact saying Impact. Now we need to get back used to saying TNA. At the TNA TV taping, Will Ospreay dropped some hints about joining TNA. Talking about how he was a fan of Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe, and AJ Styles, three wrestlers who've got nothing to do with the new version of TNA. But you can see it, in the about so Bound for Glory. He threw a little cheeky Styles clash in, didn't he? Ospreay in his match there. He said he didn't want to come to Impact Wrestling. He wanted to come to TNA, so he wants to step foot in the TNA ring. He's also been doing interviews today where he's apparently talked about being open to going to WWE too. But it's Will Ospreay, so it wouldn't shock you. Like it's actually not impossible for him to potentially do something daft and sign for like a newly rebranded TNA. But the other big one is Punk being backstage at that taping. Obviously they take the Bound for Glory show in Chicago, which was home to Ace Steel working backstage there, which I think is like, feels like a real shrewd move. That like, oh yeah, by the way, Ace, I've been in touch in a while, but we're about to relaunch this TNA thing. Fancy coming back and working production? Oh, by the way, we have this policy where it's all dogs allowed. If you want to tell anyone, also there's free Pepsi on tap, just in case you want to bring any friends along. And Ace Steel did bring a friend along to work, as Punk was spotted backstage at the Chicago taping, according to House of Wrestling, and was apparently helping out, giving advice to any wrestlers that want it. Didn't start any fights, JP. Nobody got bitten. No muffins were eaten. It was all a very nice scene, according to the Punk camp until we find out that Kazarian will come out, or some Impact wrestler will come out, and it'll turn out that he called someone a prick, or he wouldn't let somebody backstage or something like that. But that's interesting, that he's there backstage in the mix. I don't think I genuinely believe that we're going to get a CM Punk in Impact. I think it would, it would be a big step down for Punk to say the least. If he's not doing it, obviously out of AEW, WWE, whether you believe the reports or not, aren't going to be using him. I think he knows his brand. I think he knows, even if it's a revamped TNA with a load of money behind it, and they get their fucking Challenge TV deal back, and they start running arenas in Europe again, even then, I think Punk knows, he had experience himself. TNA is always going to TNA, him and Julia De Niro and Raven and all that stuff. Back
he got fired.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Got fired. Yeah. Because
of the fight with Teddy Hart.
Yeah. All that too.
All of that stuff. The bit where they used to eat and the rest of it. It is. Would you do it if they could? Of course you would. I can't help but feel that this is just a thing to kind of leverage of these are the potential options I've got and the rest of it. Like I say, I always keep a close eye on New Japan, and a very short run there is the kind of thing to go, well, there is the possibility to bring him in and have that kind of short run with him. It doesn't have to be like an extended mammoth contract for it. Would it put some eyeballs on them? I mean, Access TV and stuff like that would be it just seems to be such a downgrade in terms of what he's dealing with. He
did do that WWE Fox and Friends show thing, whatever the fuck that was. The talk show, right? No, so he's not stranger to killing his own brand. He also went into UFC and got knocked out in 10 seconds or whatever it was. So he's not,
just commentary,
he's
isn't he?
Protecting his brand. He's not that protective. It's not impossible.
Yeah, he does commentary for real lower level MMA promotions as well. Stuff that there's not a lot of money in it, but that's what he's doing. So do I think it's going to happen? No, I just can't see this happen. This feels like, to go into TNA analogy mode, when Jarrett went over to New Japan and hit Hulk Hogan with a guitar. When he went over there, trying to get him in, and what do we get? We got Jimmy Hart instead. So it feels like that's what we're getting with Ace Steel. He'll be back as a producer. And he'll say to them, it's actually quite good here and all the rest of it. Is Colt Cabana coming in? Absolutely fucking not. Is there as many people? Can he have the run of the place? Pretty much. There wouldn't be anybody who would view themselves as being kind of close to his level. I can't see that happening. I can't see Alex Shelley having an enormous kickoff. I think they would all just go, well, we should get a boost in the attendances. You would have thought they'll be running Chicago fucking again. I'll tell you that much.
They'll be like Tony every other weekend from Chicago.
Every other weekend, for there.
It's interesting though that they're in the news. As a Punk fan, do I want to see that? No, obviously. I think option A is AEW still. I still hold the candle. Maybe one day he'll go back, because it just felt like the perfect place for Punk, and we're never getting it again. Option 2 would be New Japan. Option 3 would be WWE, and then a distant option 4 or 5. I think would be I'll probably have WWE ahead of New Japan, to be fair. I think he could make that work. Impact would be Impact would be literally no one else will take. And he seems to desperately want to wrestle, so there's that possibility there. But do I see it? No. Do I think it's a good idea? Also, no. But fun to dream, JP. Fun to dream.
I think that's almost the big takeaway, is he does still want to be around wrestling. That much isn't in doubt.
Yeah.
Who is going to be out there is going to pay him the kind of money he wants, give him the amount of freedom and latitude that he wants as well, i.e. bringing in basically his own people, probably his own bookers, and while de facto booking the product. That's the kind of thing. Is there any company who's going to be willing to do that? He's going to be willing to afford him as well. That's why, if I'm going to hedge my bets, and I know there's not even any rumors about this. This is just me thinking, okay, logically, where could he go to for a short-term run, which doesn't require him to do too many dates, where he'll have a good handle on his creative, but also have a good amount of latitude? And he thinks, well, New Japan seems to be able to do that, but that's more to then show that's all leverage for WWE. That's what ultimately all of this is about, because he recognizes that's the big game in town if he wants to be earning big money in wrestling. No Vince McMahon about hoping that the kind of time heals all wounds, but a load of people thinking, well, you're a prick. So that's the stumbling block there. Impact don't have that kind of freedom to be able to say, oh, I don't know if you'll get on with the people in the back in Impact. Fuck that. Johnny Swinger doesn't like him. Johnny Swinger is gone.
Gone. It's Collision. Like, Collision was bad enough. Imagine them on TNA. They'd just be like, yeah, whatever you want to do. Like, start a backstage fight club and get rid of every wrestler who's not from Chicago. Everyone who's not straight edge or not from Chicago, get the fuck out. Anyone who gives them a funny look in catering, you're out too. Like, actually, I think that might be bad. I think he needs like a WWE where there's some checks and balances, I think, or like a New Japan where there's at least a little bit of a stringent thing. But Ewan says NWA in the chat. That's not happening. I don't see him crossing over to that side anytime soon.
Well,
you know.
And he mentions there about New Japan Strong. It's really the New Japan USA shows. But the problem with that is how many of them are cross-pollinated with AEW and various other people from that. You start to get into
Kenny and Punk.
Yeah, it would be mad. It would be like kind of really fun to kind of see that happen. But I mean, that would be, I wouldn't never rule that out as an option as well. And I suppose we haven't spoken really about the Ospreay stuff as well. I mean, that's just him hedging his bets, is what I just assume for this. I mean,
he could end up anywhere. I don't think if he was smart, and he's not, but if he was, I think like he should sign for WWE probably at some point soon. Just from his point of view, I don't want to see it. Like I think Suit said on Twitter, it's like what I said about Ben Carter ages ago, and I had all the Americans jumping down me mentions. Like at that point, I suppose maybe not now with like if Triple H is in charge of creative, which we can get into. He's kind of dead to me at that point. It's kind of like the Ospreay now, who goes out there and goes out there for the 11-star matches, to quote one of our co-hosts, will be dead at that point, and it will be a different version of Will Ospreay. But if you're smart and you're advising him and you had an agent or something like that, they'd probably say take the WWE money and it'd be better for your body probably long term. I think working that style. Ospreay, he's not fucking smart enough to do that. He's probably going to end up signing for AEW, but also carry on working in New Japan. You'll find a way to do another 4 retirement tours of the British Indies. You'll end up in TNA as well. I would rule Punk, I very much doubt lands in TNA. Ospreay, absolutely as part of some deal with some other package. Like he decides he wants to do split his time between TNA and New Japan or something like that. Anything's on the table with him. You could never know what call that bloke's going to fucking make.
Which really, given all, and we've seen it himself in terms of his body and his welfare, he can't be doing that flying everywhere business. That needs to be put to an end. And the impressions of this year, and this goes into the Bound for Glory card, is I'm just going to have one of those years where I'm going to win Wrestler of the Year, and I'll have all these brilliant matches and all these different promotions. I'm going to do Noah, I'm going to do Impact, I'll be New Japan, I'll be in AEW, I'll have wrestled Wembley Stadium, all of these very tick box things. Basically, you get out of the way before you can kind of entirely settle down. And like I mean, what is the best from a business decision for him to make the most money? It was WWE by a country mile, really, in many ways. AEW, I think that's the issue, is then when you're AEW, you've not really left New Japan. You can always go back in there. They'll always have you in there. It just seems to be, I don't want to say it's a spin-off of New Japan like Frasier was to Cheers. But in some ways, like...
Well, Frasier is to Frasier.
It is exactly what Frasier is to Frasier at this point. Still haven't seen any of that show.
Yeah, Nicholas Lyndhurst never gets normal, mate. It's like a weird crossover of Only Fools and Horses and Frasier. It's there's something wrong about it.
It's just the money I think he should be getting at this stage for what he would want. Of like, this is like the biggest British wrestling star that you can sign. And you're going to get that person and you're going to put them all over your TV. I can see a point where they get their Sky Sports deal back and the rest of it. And it's the thing that they would hope would regenerate stuff over here of going, well, we've got Will Ospreay now, because they'll have, regardless of what Brent Council have said or haven't said regarding attendance figures and the rest of it, the idea of AEW running Wembley Stadium was enough, I think, to kind of scare them about taking like the UK for granted. This feels like an easier way of them getting around that as well, even if creatively there's a whole load of other stuff that I would be like kind of very uncertain about. But
it's not impossible. It's very much like the Walter thing. How long did we hear, Walter doesn't want to move to the United States? It's never happening. Now Ospreay is making those kind of same talk about how, he's open to signing with WWE. He would be maybe interested in relocating to the United States. It's definitely a possibility at this point. But